You know, Guy, I gotta tell you, fall might be my favorite time of year. You've got a nice change in the weather, it's not too hot, not too cold. There's football season, corporations are finding more and more ways to shove pumpkins directly down our throats, and there are plenty of beautiful leaves on the ground.
Leifs? Don't you mean leaves?
No. Man, it is a crying shame that so few people have played Thracia 776. It's honestly one of my favorites in terms of gameplay and story, and the way it tells Leif's tale is a big part of that. So today, we're going to be looking at Leif's journey through FE4 and 5, and seeing what makes the least known lord so special. Tackling lesser known characters is kinda my forte, so the series' least known lord is perfect for me. Plus, if I make a shitty video, I'm only pissing off Thracia fans, which is only like 12 people. Now, first impressions are everything. So naturally, Leif has the very impressive introduction of him getting his fucking ass kicked. Leif has tried to raise a rebellion against the big, bad, evil empire by raiding Ulster, but since he isn't the main character, he doesn't have the abilities to succeed against all odds. So Seliph, the actual lead, saves him. I mentioned this in the Seliph video, but this scene is kind of a way of Seliph repaying the debt of Quan, as Quan saved Sigurd when he was under fire from Verdane, and now Seliph is saving Leif. Even if his introduction doesn't have him winning, it still does portray him as a virtuous young man who wishes to fight back against tyranny in a world where most are too scared to do so. So he still manages to have a decent debut. He has a conversation with Seliph in his introduction chapter that also serves to give a likable impression. In it, he gives some exposition about what happened to his home of Leonster. Basically, everything went to shit after Travant killed Quan Nethelin, and Leif has been raised in secret by Finn away from Castle Leonster. Leif eventually grew strong enough that he felt like he could fight back against the Empire, but he wasn't up to snuff and was crushed by the Empire's might. However, he doesn't waste any time feeling sorry for himself. He knows the loss was his fault, and he doesn't let it get in his way, saying, quote, "Our failure was squarely my fault. However, this isn't over. I am the son of Quan, a man worthy of being dubbed a Knight of Nyorun. I refuse to put to shame his legacy, and so I'll live on. I'll fight on, no matter the cost." Leif's pride in his bloodline and his declaration help portray his character very well in just a few lines. He's noble, he's humble, and he's virtuous, all traits that make him endearing. The next chapter has him talking with Finn, and again he has a moment of humility, where he thanks Finn for being the best dad in all of Yggdrasil. Leif acknowledges that he never would have made it as far as he did without Finn's help, as Finn has protected Leif and even starved himself so Leif could eat. Leif's heartfelt thanks to Finn is a touching moment that resonates well with the player, as even though the player has had little exposure to Leif, they know Finn well and are happy to see him loved. This chapter also has Leif encounter Altena for the first time, who to him is just a depressed woman on a dragon. And while he is correct, what he doesn't know is that depressed woman on a dragon is actually his sister. Finn manages to piece together who she is because he recognizes Altena's weapon as the Holy Lance of Leonster. And once Leif and Finn realize only Altena could wield that, they both set out and try to save her. Thankfully, that task proves to be way easier than one would think, as all Leif has to do is talk to his sister and make her look into his eyes and BAM! She believes him. After that, it's a whole bunch of Travant stuff that, if you wanted me to explain it, you should have voted for him on the Patreon polls. He's been on there like 3 times and has never won. The Travant thing I do want to mention, though, is Leif's boss quote against him. As Leif says, quote, "We meet at last, Travant. I've awaited this day for so long. This is what kept me alive all this time. I've lived for this alone. To choke the life from you with my bare hands." What? Did you want some kind of in-depth analysis on that? My analysis is that the line is fucking awesome. We're moving on. With that out of the way, The only conversation that I really want to talk about is when he talks to Altena after the army leaves Thracia. Altena is worried that they'll have to fight Arion, her foster brother, again, since Julius saved him, and anything that interacts with Julius usually doesn't end well. Leif shows some plucky optimism here, saying, quote, "To be honest, Altena, I believe Arion surviving is actually good news. Think about it. So long as Arion is alive, there is still hope that we can help him. Never give up, Altena. So long as we keep moving forward, surely everything will be fine in the end." This pep talk gives insight to both Altena and Leif's characters, and gives Leif a kind moment with his sister that's just really sweet to see. After that, Leif's role in the story is done. He has a few lover conversations that are cute, noticeably with Nana and Tinny, but overall, that's all to him in FE4. He's a likable character for sure, who has a nice arc with his sister that makes him one of Gen 2's better characters. He'd be a solid character even if FE4 was all he had. But FE5 decided to go and make him a star, making his failed rebellion the main story of the game. And FE5 uses its status as a prequel, or midquel, I guess, to make Leif's story really engaging. Because before you even get to FE5's title screen, you know one major fact. You are playing a losing battle. From the word go with Leif's tale, you are thinking, when he gets to that Ulster raid, he loses everything. And it makes FE5's story a sort of ticking time bomb. You know everything's going to go wrong. It's just a matter of figuring out when. The first few chapters of FE5's story have Leif going through the motions that most lords do. Like, oh no, a damsel has been kidnapped! Yeah, Marth and Sigurd can relate to that. And then after that, there's the classic scene of, we need to get to somewhere, but I can't watch as bandits are doing bandit things, which Alma and Erica could relate to. But that notion of Leif running into danger despite his better judgment is very important, as his impulsiveness is something that comes up very frequently, and is a major part of his story. And it doesn't take very long for Leif's impatience to have him run headfirst into a trap set up by the game's main villain Raedric. And Leif, alongside Avail and Lithis, for some reason, are thrown in prison in Manster, and things only get worse for him from there. Because this isn't a time where the hero gets captured and successfully makes his cunning escape. Leif's weakness gets Avail turned to stone by resident douchebag Veld. And while Avail's defeat is only kind of Leif's fault, Leif takes it very hard, blaming himself for Avail's defeat and putting it all on his shoulders. His impulsiveness takes over again, because as soon as he escapes, he's trying to make a plan to save her, but his tactician Augustus quickly makes him get his priorities in check. The entirety of Yggdrasil is, well, kinda fucked, and Leif should be putting his priorities on saving the people's broken hearts and stopping the Empire, rather than going on a personal rescue mission. Leif shows some maturity here, grasping the severity of the situation and swallowing his emotions, choosing to prioritize fighting the Empire. It's a scene that shows all of Leif's traits, good and bad. His impulsiveness, his tendency to anger, but also his kindness and his maturity. It helps flesh out his story as well as the story of Yggdrasil as a whole. The people are broken. The Empire hasn't just crushed their bodies, but their souls as well. And Leif realizes if he is to stand any chance against them, he needs to inspire the people to fight back. And the thing about that is it's not just something Leif does that's shown in the story, but it's shown in the gameplay as well. Leif's army is largely comprised of a bunch of average Joes. Sure, he has some military units like Finn, Dean, or Selfina, but he has just as many, if not more, people who are just normal citizens. Hicks, Osian, Ralph, Pern. Leif's quest to inspire the citizens of Thracia to rise up does genuinely make them rise up to fight with him. It's a nice case of gameplay story integration that really helps make Leif's struggles against the Empire and the Lopter cult feel more real. He's scrapping together an army from the bargain bin at Walmart. And that's crazy to think about. Leif is just getting his army built out of people like you and me, normal people living normal lives. Recruiting strangers to fight in an army is absurd. Strangers are much better recruited to give me money. And you can do just that by joining the FEMS Paint Patreon. For as little as $3 a month, you can get access to benefits like early access to videos, visual and audio shoutouts, and if you shill out the big bucks of $7 a month, you can get access to polls to decide the fate of future videos on the channel. We've had a lot of one-vote wins, so your vote matters more than in the American election system. My patrons include the likes of Andrew Crockett, Arctic R. I swear to God, Patreon, you need to limit how long people's usernames can be. Atomic X160, Benz Again, Don Juan, Fire Emblem Lord, Follow Penta the North Star on Twitch, Great Riek, Green Brigand, Hell on Heelys, My Anus is Bleeding, Keith and Coleman, Kieran Morin, Lightning Bolt, Me Do a Gamer, Memi, Mesomementomia, Michael Hamilton, Nem to the 64th Power, Nevrix the Fallen Shield Guy, Ranger Man Sam, Ryan Walter, Space 1255, Steph D, Tato, Anti-Ginger, Brentendo 11, Drew Hack, Kazu Foxfire, Max, Sazegi, Tell Your Bop, and that was it. Alright, we'll get back to the video, and I swear to God, Patreon, please, if you don't limit how long people's names can be, they are going to keep doing this to me. Leif's plan is to go to Tara, the last city in the Thracian region that hasn't yet fallen to the Empire. Augustus mentions that this is a very difficult task given the force of their army, which is certainly just him being paranoid, and not something that will come up in later events. On the way to Tara, Leif comes into conflict with Gomez, a bandit of Thracia who's been forced to pillage a village due to he and his men facing starvation. This exchange has Leif, for a back-of-a-letter phrase, check his privilege. Leif thought that the Thracians were all savages, a brutal militaristic state who do what they do because they like flaunting their might. But with Gomez, Leif realizes that the people of Thracia are the way that they are because of circumstances well beyond their control. The land of Thracia is rocky terrain ill-suited for farming, so they have to bleed for their money via mercenary work or banditry. Leif's confused by this. In his idealistic mind, the Thracian people should have just traded for their food and everyone would have been happy. But he's informed that it was his own home country of Leonster that stonewalled the Thracian people, refusing to trade their excess of food because of a generational feud between the two nations due to a war some 100 years prior. Leif realized that he was blind to the struggles of the world. Though his childhood was not exactly the best, he was still helped by countless people. Finn starved himself so Leif would have food to eat. Dryass fought so Leif was safe. Leif was shielded from the horrors of war, and now it's all unfolding before his eyes. The realization strengthens Leif's resolve to unify Thracia. No longer because of the big bad Draco Knights that threaten him, but because the people on both sides are suffering, and both sides are in need of a savior. It's a scene that really helps contextualize Thracia and Leonster as a whole, because while you could split hairs as to who's at fault for what and for why, at the end of the day, none of that matters. Both nations are filled with people who are trying to live their lives as best they can. This conflict fuels the motivation of so many characters. Leif, Finn, Quan, Travant, and it goes even beyond them. This conflict helps make the world of Yggdrasil feel more real. There are many fights going on just beyond the big, bad, evil Satan Empire, and Leif's fight is one of those smaller fights. Just because Leif isn't saving the world doesn't mean he isn't fighting for something important, and Leif's resolve to unify the nations that have been fighting for a century makes him come off as very admirable and kind, if perhaps a bit naive. After dealing with the bandits, Leif makes his way for Tara, and on the way, he meets up with a man named Dryass. Yes, that's actually his localized name. Dryass is one of the men who sacrificed himself for Leif's safety. In particular, Dryass lost one of his arms. Seeing this again has Leif understand the sacrifices made for him, and with Dryass in tow, Leif now has 2 tacticians beside him, and Dryass is more than encouraging of Leif's plan to go fight and save Tara. But see, remember when Augustus said that going to a city that is under siege by the Empire probably wasn't the smartest idea? Yeah, well, turns out Augustus was kinda, completely correct. Because Leif's passion to fight for Tara, admirable as it was another mistake, as Leif is way too undermanned to actually save the city. In fact, the only reason Leif doesn't die in the battle is because Linoen, the ruler who leads Tara, is engaged to Arion of Thracia, and Arion allows her and Leif to escape. This is another instance of Leif's kindness moving faster than his mind, as he was clearly warned of how much this was a bad idea. But thankfully, this is definitely a one-time thing, and in no way, shape, or form something that's going to happen again with greater repercussions. As you might notice, Leif's story kinda involves him getting his ass kicked at almost every turn. But after Tara, it's finally time for him to win something. He's set his sights on retaking his home castle of Leonster, and for the first time in the entire game, Leif manages to catch a break. Regardless of whether or not he takes the sneaky beaky path or the direct assault, Leif charges in and takes back his home of Leonster, and it is at an all-time high in morale for him. He gets his unit promotion, the people of Leonster cheer for his return, and everything seems to be going well for him. So, naturally, this victory is short-lived. A random woman, or Miranda if you recruited her, says that Ulster is under fire. Their people started their own rebellion, and it is going very far south. Leif understands this, and the player dreads what he does next. He orders an assault on Ulster. The player knows this is a bad call. After all, it was his crushing loss at Ulster that set him up to be in dire straits in Fire Emblem 4. Augustus and Dryass know this is a bad call. The two have been butting heads the entire game, and they managed to agree for once in saying that Leif does not have the manpower, and what manpower he does have is exhausted from just taking back Leonster. But like with Tara, Leif's will not be swayed, and against his better judgment, Dryass volunteers to lead the charge to Ulster. This entire scene hurts because the player knows that Leif should listen to his tacticians, but Leif refuses, and his passion claims a substantial victim. Dryass is killed when he leads the charge. And while Dryass was not a playable unit, he was one with a lot of story significance, and was responsible for giving Leif a leadership star. 3 hit and void in a game with Thracia RNG, so his loss is felt by the player and Leif alike. Dryas' death and the crushing loss at Ulster is directly Leif's fault. He's not a victim of circumstance, he's a victim of himself. But he has no time to wallow in pain and grief. He picks himself up and readies his defense of Castle Leonster, waiting for aid from Seliph, which brings him to the position that he's in FE4. Which, quick aside, apparently his defense lasted for 6 months, to give a concrete time frame for how long Chapter 7 of FE4 canonically takes. But before his defensive starts, Augustus says something that I really want to bring up, and I'm going to go over it word for word here, as it really makes both Leif and Seliph's characters much more interesting to think about. I'm saying there's a reason so many people are ready to die for Lord Seliph. It's not just because he's a strong warrior. Our era demands a hero. The people clamor for one, and so someone has crafted Lord Seliph to be their hero. Forged him, if you will, in much the same way one forges metal into a blade, taking a man and sculpting him into what the people need. Do you understand? No one chooses to become a hero. They're willed into a hero by the people around them, shaped by the needs of others. Augustus' speech is really profound to me, because it makes you think, how much of Leif's will and kindness were his own, and how much of it was forced on him. The second generation of FE4 is filled with characters like that. Characters who are more forced into the roles they lived in due to the circumstances from the first generation. So it's one of those questions that really speaks to not just the characters of the game, but the human condition. How much of people's lives actually are something they live, and how much of it is just them living on autopilot? I don't know, that kind of thing is interesting to think about for me, and this speech makes Leif an interesting character study in that regard, in my opinion. The final chapters of the game have Leif bounce back from all of his failures. He goes and helps Seliph take back Manster. He goes and takes down Raedric, and then he goes and takes down Veld. The thing to remember about Leif is these are, in the grand scheme of things, small victories. Raedric and Veld are really not big players, but Leif's fight was always smaller in scale. Leif's but a bit player in a greater conflict, but the ending of Thracia has Leif win the battle he needed to win, and thus he could start his personal battle, the unification of Thracia. And it's a fight he's more than ready for. All along his journey, he's seen the scars of prejudice and what they've done to the people of Leonster and Thracia. He knows he needs compassion and empathy. Unlike his forefathers, he needs to see people as people, and not as the big bad Thracians. Leif may have been molded into the hero he is by the people around him, but honestly, what a hero he was. A man who saw the plight of the common folk and took it on his shoulders to resolve it. And no matter how many times Leif falls, he never loses sight of that goal. He fights on, in hopes of creating that peaceful Thracian peninsula. To me, Leif's tale is one of FE's best, as seeing him rise above every one of his failures makes for a very inspiring character. A fantastic lord for a fantastic story that only 12 people have played. Thank you guys very much for making it to the end of another character analysis video. We've now covered 3 lords on this channel, and that's more than I thought I'd be able to cover. That's really cool. As always, I'd like to thank the Green Brigand. He was actually the person that was in the start of the video. Him and his crusty ass, I recorded this in a bathroom at work, sound quality. But he really wanted to be on the show, so I couldn't say no. I think Leif is his favorite character, or one of his favorite characters. If you enjoyed the video, please feel free to like the video, comment on the video, subscribe to the channel, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the Patreon or the Discord server, links are in the description, and please, just play Thracia. It's a really good game. Though, if you haven't played it yet, this video pretty much spoiled everything in the game's story. Until next time.